Good evening and welcome to Gravitas. I'm Palki Sharma Upadhyay. Let's get started. As I speak to you tonight, I can also see the WION newsroom. We have an open studio, and from where I sit, the newsroom looks almost deserted. That's because a lot of our colleagues are away. Some are working from home, some others are down with the virus, and yet others are looking after loved ones who are unwell. Now, you know, we've been covering this pandemic for more than a year now. Some of us have fallen ill and recovered, and none of it has been easy. But now it feels like it has really hit home as people around you fall one after the other. What keeps us going is hope. What keeps us worried are the numbers. They don't look good. You would know by now that India has announced vaccination for all citizens above 18 years of age, and that should help immensely. That's very good news. But until the rollout begins, we have to contend with a deadly surge. Tonight we'll discuss why the second wave is different. Why it looks more difficult, what lessons have we learned, and also the ones that we haven't, and how some countries have crushed the surge enough to get rid of masks. How did they do it? What did we miss? We'll discuss all of that. Also on the show, is Pakistan witnessing a civil war? Violent protests against France led to the banning of a radical group, and since then the country has been in meltdown. Is another peace deal in the making in West Asia? Our sworn enemies Saudi Arabia and Iran talking to each other. We'll bring you all the buzz. Club politics and big money have rocked the world of football. A new Super League has been announced. Fans are not happy, neither are political leaders. And NASA's latest achievement, trying to land a helicopter on Mars. We have the images. We begin as always with Gravitas Global Headlines.
Indian government announces that it will open its COVID-19 vaccination drive to all adults from May 1st, as the vast nation battles a massive spike in infections that has overwhelmed its healthcare system. UK Prime Minister Boris Johnson cancels his India visit for the second time due to the worsening COVID situation in India. Johnson says the two sides will hold virtual meetings for a transformed India-UK relationship. Hong Kong to suspend flights from India, Pakistan and the Philippines for 2 weeks, starting tomorrow. The decision comes after the Asian financial hub detected a new strain of the COVID-19 virus in the country for the first time. The Chadian army says it has killed 300 rebels, with some 150 rebels captured, who waged a major incursion into the north of the country in which a rebel convoy was decimated. In a tit-for-tat move, Russia expels 20 Czech diplomats, gives them 24 hours to leave the country. This after Czech Republic expelled 18 Russian diplomats, saying that the two alleged Russian spies accused of a nerve agent poisoning in Britain in 2018 were behind a deadly explosion at a Czech ammunition depot 4 years earlier in 2014. One person has been arrested in connection with the shooting incident at a bar in Wisconsin in the US, in which 3 persons were killed and 3 injured. The Kenosha County Sheriff's Department said the person was arrested on suspicion of first-degree intentional homicide. Adverse weather conditions are hampering firefighters' efforts to put out the blaze on the slope of South Africa's famed Table Mountain, which began on Sunday morning, damaging buildings and prompting the evacuation of hikers from the city's most famous landmark. Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau directs federal healthcare workers to help Toronto and the province of Ontario battle a third wave of COVID-19 infections, forcing shutdowns of schools and businesses. The Canadian province of Ontario will also begin offering AstraZeneca's vaccine to people turning 40 or older. The announcement of a breakaway European Super League involving 12 of the continent's biggest clubs has been met with widespread condemnation from football's governing bodies and fans. The likes of Manchester United, Liverpool, Real Madrid, Barcelona and Juventus are among the founding clubs, and the tournament will rival the continent's existing elite competition, the UEFA Champions League. UEFA has called the ESLA disgraceful, self-driving plan and threatened the clubs with bans, while many of the fans of the clubs involved have held protests against the move. Jose Mourinho has been sacked as manager by Tottenham Hotspur after just 17 months in charge. After a string of poor results, Spurs are 7th in the Premier League and were also knocked out of the Europa League by unfancy Dinamo Zagreb last month. The decision comes just days before Spurs' EFL Cup final against Manchester City. Mourinho replaced Mauricio Pochettino in November 2019 and led Spurs to a 6th-placed finish in his first season. Former Tottenham player Ryan Mason will take temporary charge of the club.
If you're in India, we have news for you. All citizens above the age of 18 can now get a Wuhan virus vaccine in India. The government has rolled out phase 3 of the world's biggest vaccination drive. It will come into effect on the 1st of May. So what will be different in phase 3? First of all, the pricing and procurement of vaccines, it will be more flexible. It will be tailor-made to suit local needs, says the government. Point number 2, vaccine manufacturers will be given incentives to produce more and to partner with new national and international players. They're opening the market. Number 3, pharma companies can release up to 50% of their supply directly to state governments and in the open market at a pre-declared price. Number 4, states can get additional doses directly from the manufacturer. So it's a more flexible and liberal system now. At the same time, the government's free vaccination drive for essential workers and those above 45 years of age will continue. Phase 1 of India's vaccination strategy was launched on the 16th of January this year. And in this, only health and frontline workers were given the jabs. Phase 2 began on the 1st of March. This was for all citizens above 45 years of age. Phase 3 will begin on the 1st of May. And this will make India one of the 15 countries in the world where the entire adult population is being vaccinated. The decision is welcome. It comes at a time when India is struggling with a devastating second wave. The health apparatus is bursting at its seams. A vaccine, as you know, does not make you immune to the virus, but it significantly reduces the risk of serious hospitalization. The benefits of widespread vaccination are proven. Look at Israel. What you see are not old images of Israel. They're from this weekend, yesterday. People walking around without a mask. Life back to normal. The government has lifted the outdoor mask mandate, meaning you do not have to have a mask on when you're leaving your house. That's because 56% of Israel's population has vaccinated. Of course, in terms of numbers, it's a much smaller country. Population of about 9 million as against India's population of 1.3 billion. But that does not take away from the fact that mass vaccination has helped Israel. Now let's take you to Australia. Emotions ran high at the Sydney airport today. Australia and New Zealand have opened up a travel bubble without quarantine, meaning you can travel from one country to another without having to quarantine on landing. So people are basically free to move. Things we took for granted more than a year back are being celebrated today. They're making international headlines. The contrast is stark compared to other parts of the world. Look at India, for instance, where we are clocking more than 170,000 cases a day. Worldwide, more than 5.2 million people tested positive this last week. This is a 12% increase in infections. In Brazil, the healthcare system has collapsed. Europe still remains in lockdown. 1.6 million new cases are being reported every week. That's 9,500 fresh infections every hour in Europe. 160 people get infected every minute with the Wuhan virus. The global situation is alarming, to say the least. The WHO says we are approaching the highest rate of infection ever. The second wave is worse than the first. So what did Israel, Australia and New Zealand do to beat it? What did they do right? Two things. They allowed science to take the lead and took tough decisions in time. And the second thing they did was bipartisan consensus. That's what they achieved. They did not let politics defeat their pandemic response. And that's saying a lot. New Zealand and Australia announced border curbs in February 2020. That was the time when most countries were still tracking what was happening in China. But these two countries, Australia and New Zealand, began contact tracing for international travelers. February 2020, they moved fast. Israel, on the other hand, struggled in the early days. But once the vaccines came, it moved swiftly. Israel paid a premium for the Pfizer shot. Israel paid more, but it secured supplies for all its citizens. It has vaccinated 57% of its population with at least one shot, and close to 55% have got both the doses. The result is this. Australia is largely free of the Wuhan virus. New Zealand's 7-day average is just 2 cases. And in Israel, you do not need a mask anymore. Let's also talk about bipartisan consensus. The ruling party and the opposition party came together to fight the pandemic in these countries. In Australia, for instance, leaders from both sides persuaded people to take the pandemic seriously and to give up civil liberties if needed. In New Zealand, when Prime Minister Jacinda Ardern and other ministers took a 20% pay cut, the opposition also joined them. Israel has had 4 elections in 2 years. No party has a majority. Coalitions are crumbling, but that did not stop Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu and his political rival Benny Gantz from forming an emergency government to tackle the pandemic. This is how you respond to a crisis. The virus is changing constantly, but our weapons to fight it are still the same. And we all know what needs to be done. We've said it enough. We just have to do it effectively and sincerely. And the next big challenge, as we know, is mutation, deadlier variants of the Wuhan virus driving the second wave. First it was Europe, then Brazil and Africa, and now the virus mutations have struck Asia. And as we know, the Wuhan virus knows no boundaries. The double mutant, for instance, that was found in India last year is now being spotted around the world. The flight bans are back. Here's a report.
If 2020 was about containing the virus, in 2021, governments are playing catch-up with it. The reason is mutations. After the British and South African variants, an Indian mutation is now quickly becoming a matter of concern worldwide. It's called the double mutant. As the name suggests, the variant carries 2 mutations of the virus. Scientists had earlier found them separately, but last year in India, they were reported together for the first time.
This virus variant, it's a variant of interest, the B1617 lineage. This was first detected and reported by India, having 2 mutations, the E484Q and the L452R. Those are specific mutations within the genome. This was reported by scientists out of India. They actually presented to us at our Virus Evolution Working Group on Monday, giving us some information about the studies that are underway and working in collaboration across the country, but also with scientists around the world.
It is believed that the double mutant is driving India's second wave. While the study into this mutation has been limited, reports say the prevalence of the double mutant was as high as 52% in January. In Maharashtra, one of the biggest hotspots in the country, the double mutant was found in more than 60% of the samples tested. As India struggles with its second wave, reports say the double mutant has jumped borders. It has now been detected in at least 16 countries. The list includes the United States, the United Kingdom, Australia, and New Zealand. Is the double mutant deadlier? Researchers are still trying to find out, but one of the mutations in this variant is known to be much more infectious. Reports say this mutation increases viral transmission by 20% and reduces the efficacy of antibodies by more than 50%. This could mean two things. One, the virus can spread faster to more people, and two, it raises the risk of infection. As a result, perhaps, flights from India are now facing bans. Hong Kong has banned passenger planes from India for 14 days. Flights from Pakistan and the Philippines have been banned too. Earlier, New Zealand had banned flights from India due to the second wave surge. Recently, Hong Kong detected cases of the N501Y strain, another mutation that's highly infectious. The fact that the Wuhan virus has mutated doesn't come as a surprise. It's the nature of these mutations that is a cause of concern. The variants of concern are infecting more people and weakening the vaccines that were supposed to be the world's exit strategy from this pandemic. Mutations might extend the war against this virus. What's your defense against them? The tried and tested weapons: masks, hand sanitizers, and social distancing. Bureau Report, World is One.
Now let's talk about India in detail. The second wave is growing every day. And frankly, calling it a wave is misleading now. What we are seeing is a tsunami of cases. More than 270,000 were reported on Sunday alone. The government has responded by expanding its vaccine drive. From the 1st of May, every Indian aged 18 plus will be eligible for a vaccine, but herd immunity is still a distant dream. So where are we headed? The numbers have to fall at some point, we know that, but the question is when? What can the government do to crush this curve? And how is the second wave different from the first? Let's look at data first. This is what India's daily caseload looks like. On the 12th of April, India was at 161,000 cases. 6 days later, 273,000 cases. We did the math. Look at that graph. This is a 70% surge in less than a week. A 70% increase in cases. So the trajectory is not looking good. And a lot of people are asking, when will India hit the peak? Well, the answer is no one knows. It's like driving up a hill. You know you're past the peak only when you're driving down. Nonetheless, some models have made bold claims, and most of them think that May 2021 will be the peak next month. But India has consistently bucked the statisticians. In the first wave, they made doomsday predictions about India, and we know that those never materialized. And thank God for that. This year, they said February would mark a decline in cases. The very opposite happened. By the end of February, cases started going up. The fact is, models work under perfect conditions. They do not account for super spreader campaign rallies or mass religious gatherings. These are externalities, aberrations that make projections impossible. India did not plan for the second wave. So it is now reacting to crises as they come. Even the courts are having to step in now. The Allahabad High Court has ordered mini lockdowns in 5 cities in Uttar Pradesh. And mind you, this is not a court's job. But that's how bad the situation is. The judges are being forced to step in, they say, thanks to the administration's inaction. The most pressing challenge right now is oxygen, or the lack of it. How serious is the shortage in India? It doesn't look good. Maharashtra has already reached full capacity. Madhya Pradesh does not have oxygen plants of its own. And states that do not have or do have excess oxygen have no means to transport it. So in a matter of days, the demand for oxygen has shot up by 60%. Remember, the Wuhan virus attacks your lungs. Supplemental oxygen is critical to treating it. A shortage of cylinders can be devastating. So what is the government's plan to deal with this? There are 3 specific measures that are being implemented. Number 1, importing oxygen. The government is looking to buy 50,000 tons of medical oxygen. Number 2, a ban on supply to industries. From the 22nd of April, Indian industries will not have access to oxygen. This stock will be diverted to hospitals. And number 3, The Oxygen Express, this is a railways initiative, special trains will transport oxygen cylinders across the country, and this is going to be a game changer for rural India. What about hospital beds? A similar story is unfolding there. We're getting reports of patients being turned away from hospitals. The problem is acute. In New Delhi, the national capital, banquet halls and hotels are being turned into makeshift hospitals. The Chief Minister says only 100 beds are left in Delhi. So India is still treating patients while the rest of the world is immunizing them. How did we end up here? How did India crush the first wave and then get swamped by the second? To understand this, we need to compare the two waves. What are the similarities and what are the differences? For instance, does the second wave infect more young people? That's what most people say, but the data does not say so. In both the waves, 70% of patients were aged 40 plus. So the elderly are still the most vulnerable group. What about younger patients? In the first wave, they made up 5.8% of the cases, now 4.2%. And this is not just a medical trend, mind you. It's just that we've opened up schools and public activities, so kids who stayed at home last year were out playing on the streets this year, and that accounts for a lot of these younger cases. What about the symptoms? Let's look at the most common one, shortness of breath. In the first wave, 41% of the patients complained of breathlessness. In the second wave, 47.5%. And this trend has extended to the use of supplemental oxygen. 41% patients in the first wave needed oxygen, and this time that figure has gone up to 54.5%. So more than half the admitted patients are using oxygen cylinders, which is why the shortage is unsettling. But it's not all bad news. India's fatality rate is under control. In fact, it is lower than the first wave so far. Another feature of this second surge has been false negatives. You take a test, it comes out negative, but you may actually be infected. Why is this happening? Some reports blame RT-PCR tests. Initially, it was said that virus mutations may mislead tests, giving you a negative result. But the government of India has dismissed this report. It says that RT-PCR can catch all mutations, provided the test is done right. And if that's the case, why are so many false negatives popping up? One possible reason is shoddy testing. You see, clinics are swamped with people right now. The demand has shot up, and collecting swabs is a delicate task. Not everyone has got the perfect training. So what's the big takeaway here? India relaxed at the wrong moment. The masks and social distancing disappeared when the vaccines arrived. In contrast, that was the time to put our heads down. India missed a golden chance to crush the pandemic. We're seeing a success story slowly unravel, thanks to a lack of foresight. And as India battles the new wave of the Wuhan virus, Pakistan seems to be at war with itself. In the name of faith, thousands are running riot on the streets of Pakistan, demanding the expulsion of the French ambassador to the country. And in the name of saving its already abysmal global reputation, Islamabad has unleashed a brutal crackdown on the protesters. It's a civil war-like situation, and it's getting worse with each passing day.
This slogan is echoing across Pakistan. It means, "Here I am at your service, O Prophet." For these protesters, this slogan is more than a rallying cry. It's a way of life. But for Islamabad, it has become a headache, an inescapable dilemma. In the name of faith, thousands have descended on the streets of Pakistan. They're demanding the expulsion of the French ambassador over the publication of Prophet Muhammad's caricatures.
हमारे पास ना तो कोई असला है ना हम दहशतगर्द हैं पर उन लोगों ने हमारी एक बात नहीं सुनी वो आते गए उन्होंने स्ट्रेट फायर मारे और शेलिंग की स्ट्रेट और हमारे बहुत से आदमी शहीद हो गए जो शहीद होते गए उनका एक ही नारा था लब्बाइक या रसूल अल्लाह सफ़ीर को इधर से दफ़ा करो हमारा फ्रांस से कोई तल्लुक़ नहीं.
For the Imran Khan government, this demand is excessive and extortionate. Deporting the French ambassador will have severe consequences. It will jeopardize Pakistan's ties with the French government and ruin its already abysmal global reputation of being an extremist-minded state. The result is this: a civil war has broken out in the country. Radical Islamists, women, children, lawyers, doctors.
This is not Rasat Medina. And please don't quote Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam next time, Imran Khan.
News anchors,
Wazir-e-Azam sahab, aisi to nahi Riyasat Medina.
even army officials. They have all united against the Pakistan government. Prime Minister Imran Khan is feeling the heat. He has launched a massive crackdown. Security forces have surrounded every city. And they're shooting to kill. In some areas, the streets have been flooded with acid.
उन्होंने डायरेक्ट फायर किए हैं और उसके बाद उन्होंने तेज़ाब वाला पानी भी डाला है. हमारे इधर काफ़ी लड़के जो ज़ख्मी हैं, उनकी किसी की कमर जल गई है, किसी का चेहरा, किसी का पूरा जिस्म जो है जल गया है. तेज़ाब वाला पानी उन्होंने डाला है.
More than 500 people have been injured. 2,000 plus protesters have been arrested. The Interior Minister says the situation is under control.
देखिए कोई चीज़ नहीं लग रही, इंशाल्लाह यही पुलिस और यही रेंजर्स हैंडल करेगी और अल्लाह के हुक्म से फ्रांस के तमाम शहरी यहाँ पे महफूज हैं, कोई खतरा नहीं है.
But the public sentiment has turned against Imran Khan. In Karachi, all markets have been shut in solidarity with the protesters.
फ्रांस के सफीर को पाकिस्तान से वापस भेज देना चाहिए. हम उसी के ज़्यादा बेहतर है क्योंकि हम नबी वसल्लम के दीवाने हैं और उनके ऊपर ही जान कुर्बान कर सकते हैं.
In Lahore, 11 policemen were taken hostage. They were freed only after many rounds of talks and a severe thrashing from the protesters.
TLP से बातचीत चल पड़ी है और पहला दौर काफ़ी बेहतरी से मुकम्मल हुआ है. सहरी के बाद सुबह दूसरा राउंड होगा. उन्होंने गिरफ्तार जो बंदे ये गमारी बनाए थे पुलिस वाले 11 वो छोड़ दिए हैं.
Islamabad says the negotiations have begun. Peace will soon be restored in the country. But the reality is the protesters are far from being diffused. Leading Pakistani clerics have extended their support to the protesters. Opposition parties are supporting the calls for a strike. And there are fears of a mutiny within the army. Pakistan is at war with itself. The collapse of law and order and societal deterioration are symptoms of severe trouble in the days to come. Bureau Report, WION, World is One.
The Indian Foreign Minister is in the UAE, so is the Foreign Minister of Pakistan. Is this mere coincidence or is it part of a plan? What's cooking in Abu Dhabi? In the next few minutes, we shall explore, starting with the visits. They came just days after a top Emirati diplomat confirmed that the UAE was indeed playing a key role in bringing both the countries, India and Pakistan, to the talking table. The diplomat in question is the UAE's ambassador to the United States, Yusel Al-Otaiba. Listen to this first and then we'll tell you what happened in the latest visits.
3 weeks ago, an article came out that basically highlighted the role the UAE played in bringing the Kashmir escalation down and sort of created a ceasefire, hopefully ultimately leading to restoring diplomats and getting the relationship back to a healthy level. We try to be helpful where we have influence with 2 different countries. So India and Pakistan was the most recent one.
So on Saturday, Pak Foreign Minister Shah Mahmood Qureshi embarked on a 3-day trip to the UAE. India's External Affairs Minister Dr. S. Jaishankar landed on Sunday. Interestingly, this was the second time when both these foreign ministers were in the same country at the same time, and that too in less than 3 weeks. Remember, they both came face to face in Tajikistan's capital, Dushanbe, for the Heart of Asia Summit on the 30th of March. No meeting took place there, not even an exchange of words, say reports. Did they happen to meet this time? Reports say they did not. In fact, there were no bilateral meetings on the agenda at all. So what happened then? In his day-long visit, Dr. S. Jaishankar met his UAE counterpart, Abdullah bin Zayed. They discussed bilateral cooperation, economic collaboration, community welfare and post-pandemic economic recovery. As for Mr. Qureshi, in his meeting with the UAE's foreign minister, the discussions range from bilateral trade, investment and job opportunities for the Pakistani diaspora. This is what we know officially. This is what they've chosen to share. Now, I do not want to make any assumptions, but the last-minute nature of these visits, the events that led to them, and the accompanying statements from top diplomats leave very little to imagination. Look at the order of events. The first indication came on the 25th of February, the second anniversary of the Balakot airstrikes. Both India and Pakistan surprised the world. They issued a joint statement agreeing to strictly observe ceasefire along the line of control. Then in the month of March, the real rulers of Pakistan extended an olive branch. The Pakistan Army Chief Qamar Javed Bajwa called a stable Indo-Pakistan relationship the key to unlocking South Asia's potential. The same month, on the 31st of March, Pakistan's Economic Coordination Committee recommended that the ban on importing sugar and cotton from India be lifted. Positive headlines followed, but they lasted barely 24 hours. The ban was imposed again due to domestic pressure. Nonetheless, the recommendations gave a whiff of the attempt at normalization of ties. This was followed by reports of Emirati officials facilitating back-channel talks between the two sides. We already told you the UAE's ambassador to the US owning up to his country's role. Now, the coinciding visits of both the foreign ministers have once again reignited speculation. Both Islamabad and New Delhi maintain absolute silence on what is happening. But as they say, sometimes silence speaks volumes, and especially when it comes to the India-Pakistan conundrum, nothing speaks louder than silence. So what creates rivalries in world politics? If you look at history, you'll find a list of these factors: religion, economy, land, and in some cases personal ambitions. These are the reasons why countries end up at loggerheads with each other. But there's one rivalry that has absorbed all of these factors: Iran and Saudi Arabia, the two pillars of the West Asian Cold War. Since the year 2016, Iran and Saudi Arabia have not talked. They prefer using proxies to bomb and sabotage each other, which is why the recent reports of a secret meeting are significant. So what exactly is the story here? What is the secret meeting? Officials from Iran and Saudi Arabia apparently met in Baghdad, and this happened earlier this month. What did they talk about? The civil war in Yemen. And that's significant too, because Iran and Saudi Arabia are on the opposite sides in Yemen. Iran backs the Houthi rebels. Saudi Arabia supports the government in Yemen. But since Joe Biden came to power in the US, the dynamics of this war have changed, because the United States no longer supports the Saudi coalition. Joe Biden does not want Yemeni blood on his hands. But for Saudi Arabia's crown prince, it's a personal mission. The war in Yemen was MBS's grand arrival. He was 29 years old and he led the kingdom's troops into Yemen. 6 years later, it's not going as per plan. The Houthi rebels have captured most of Yemen. Only one government stronghold remains, the city of Marib. There is a bloody battle underway for the city right now. Dozens are dying every day. If Marib falls, the government could follow. So Yemen is precarious, and Riyadh has switched tactics. It is calling for a ceasefire in Yemen. The problem is this: the Houthis are winning. For them, a ceasefire makes no sense. So the talks in Baghdad were supposed to ease this stalemate. And it's a fact that Yemen has been at war for too long. A peace deal of some sort would help. But shadow meetings are rarely successful, we know. Neither Riyadh nor Tehran has admitted to the talks. Not exactly a signal of trust and purpose. So does this meeting qualify as a thaw in relations? Well, not really. Neither side wants to be friends. This is a meeting born out of compulsion. Saudi Arabia wants to be in Joe Biden's good books. It also wants the missile attacks from across the border to end. Iran, on the other hand, is desperate for some sanctions relief. It's been pushed to the wall. So while the meeting is significant, the core differences between Saudi Arabia and Iran still remain, which brings us to the West Asian Cold War. What are these differences? Why are Iran and Saudi Arabia enemies? Well, like most conflicts, this one has its roots in religion. Saudi Arabia is a Sunni kingdom. Iran is a Shiite nation. These are the two major sects of Islam. Historically, they fought for political dominance, and it has continued with Iran and Saudi Arabia. In 1979, it was a crucial year in this Cold War. The Islamic Revolution swept through Iran. It was a challenge to Riyadh because Saudi Arabia saw itself as the natural leader of the Islamic world. And then came Iran as a new challenger, a mix of theocracy and democracy. The next big chapter was the US invasion of Iraq. Saddam Hussein was a Sunni leader. He kept Iranian influence under check. But with Saddam gone, Iran's proxy forces swarmed into Iraq, and even today, Shiite warlords hold considerable influence in Iraq, which is why Baghdad is eager to broker peace. Iraq's Prime Minister Mustafa al-Kadhimi played a key role in facilitating these talks, they say. Iraq is among the few neutral turfs, where the two rivals can engage. But the biggest jolt to the Saudi-Iran rivalry came in the year 2011, the Arab Spring. There was a regime falling every week, and both Riyadh and Tehran wanted to bring the new leadership into their camp. The end result is the fractured politics of West Asia. Countries have been reduced to pawns in this Cold War. The meeting in Baghdad is a positive step. There is no denying that. But we are still a long way from normalization. How do you even discuss issues like Islamic domination and Sunni-Shia rivalry? Instead, what Riyadh and Tehran can hope for is issue-based consensus. A robust nuclear deal is in Saudi Arabia's interest. A power-sharing deal in Yemen benefits both the parties, the entire region, in fact. But is there political will on either side? The conservatives in Iran are knocking on the doors of the presidency, and they're likely to pursue a more hawkish policy on Saudi Arabia. Same for Riyadh. What will an MBS reign look like? Will he be willing to talk peace with Iran? The bottom line is, Saudi Arabia and Iran have a lot to resolve. A small meeting in Baghdad does not even scratch the surface. They have a long way to go. Let's shift our attention to Russia, where opposition leader Alexei Navalny is fighting for his life. For the past 3 weeks, Navalny has been on a hunger strike. His health has deteriorated. Over the weekend, Navalny's doctor had warned that he could die, quote unquote, at any moment. Our next report tells you what's happening in Russia.
This man is the most prominent critic of Vladimir Putin in Russia. His name is Alexei Navalny. As we speak, he's fighting for his life. Navalny is in jail. Since March, he has also been on a hunger strike. Reports say prison authorities refuse to provide him with adequate medical care for an acute leg and back pain. So, Navalny went on a hunger strike. His condition worsened.
All we know is what we've heard from his supporters over the weekend, who say that he is in a critical condition. They say they have obtained copies of his blood work and that his potassium levels are dangerously high, that his kidneys risk imminent failure and he could be at risk of cardiac arrest as well. They say he only has a matter of days left to live.
On Sunday, his doctors tried to visit him in prison, but they were denied access.
We spent 2 hours here. Everyone understands that Alexei Navalny is in a grave critical condition. Unfortunately, we were not allowed to see him.
I'm extremely worried about my patient. I was alarmed with the test results. There's an extremely high level of potassium, and this increase indicates the progression of kidney failure. That's why I think we need to save the man.
On Monday, Navalny was transferred to a hospital in another jail. Opposition leaders have spoken up for him. Nearly a dozen politicians in Russia have published an open letter to President Putin. They hold Putin personally responsible for the life of Navalny. Moscow has neither responded nor expressed any concern. The situation is escalating. Navalny's allies have announced rallies across Russia on Wednesday. they've started a petition. If 500,000 supporters sign it, they will launch street protests again. As of Sunday, the petition was 50,000 signatures shy of its target. Navalny's health could lead to an international showdown. The European Union has told Russia that Navalny must receive medical aid. The United States is considering sanctions. US National Security Advisor Jake Sullivan has issued a statement. He says the Biden administration is weighing options to punish Russia if Navalny dies in prison. Navalny perhaps knew what was coming. In January, he said he had no plans to commit suicide in prison. As his life hangs in the balance, information about Navalny's health remains scarce. The Russian penitential system has released a statement saying that the Kremlin critic was moved for treatment with vitamins. Russian authorities say Navalny's health is satisfactory. The West is watching him closely. Bureau Report WION, World is One.
Follow the money. This self-serving advice works as well for business and politics as it does for sport. Our next story happens to be a thrilling mix of all three: big business, power politics, and the biggest game on this planet, football. 12 of Europe's top football clubs have announced their plan to defect from the UEFA's elite tournaments and set up a money-spinning, self-governing Super League. The move is being called greedy and cynical. Fans and former players have rejected the breakaway league. So have world leaders like Boris Johnson and Emmanuel Macron. Here's all you need to know about this football controversy.
The world of football is at war. 12 heavyweight clubs from England, Spain and Italy have announced a new breakaway European Super League. What does this mean? That these 12 clubs could ostensibly leave the Champions League, the European League and potentially all domestic leagues behind and play exclusively for the new self-governing league. So which are these 12 clubs? From the United Kingdom, there's Manchester United, Manchester City, Liverpool, Arsenal, Chelsea and Tottenham. From Italy, there's Juventus, Inter Milan and AC Milan. From Spain, there's Barcelona, Real Madrid and Atletico Madrid. What will be the format of this new league? The 12 clubs will be the founding members, along with 3 permanent members expected to join soon. Another 5 sides would qualify each year based on their domestic achievements. That's a total of 20 teams. They will be split into 2 groups of 10, with the top 4 in each group playing to qualify for the knockouts. Who will call the shots? The president of Real Madrid, Florentino Perez, will be the chairman of the new league, while Manchester United's co-owner Joel Glazer and Juventus president Andrea Agnelli will serve as vice chairman. Who is going to finance this league? JP Morgan Chase. The American banking giant has confirmed that it will back the $6 billion initiative, which brings us to the billion-dollar question. Why is this breakaway such a big deal? Because it all comes down to money. Creating a closed league threatens to shut off entry and access to money for smaller clubs. Instead, it would allow the 15 founding clubs to guarantee their places regardless of their performance and make them richer. Fans have not taken kindly to the news. They say this league will kill the game.
It will kill the game. It will totally kill the game. I'm not interested in European Super League. I think it's all the European Super League is basically is money.
I think it is more despicable. It is more of a greedy power grab than we ever expected.
I think it's all about money, really, because when you look at how much the fans put into these Premiership League clubs, they should be at least listened to.
Football clubs, not part of the league, are worried. They say it's unacceptable.
About this is for me absolutely unacceptable what is going here behind the scenes, and I think nobody wants it, not even the fans of the clubs who want to go there want it.
I can only say that I don't have all the details, but I fully stand behind Dortmund's position. I think it would not be good for the European football.
Politicians too have expressed their disapproval, promising that this league won't see the light of day.
We're going to look at everything that we can do with the football authorities to make sure that this doesn't go ahead in the way that it's currently being proposed. I don't think that it is good news for fans. I don't think it's good news for football in this country.
The writing is on the wall. The breakaway Super League undermines the principle of meritocracy in sport. And the breakaway clubs have a PR disaster on their doorstep to deal with. Bureau Report, WION. World is One.
We saved the best for the last. In 1903, a small town in North Carolina saw dreams take flight. A strange-looking contraption made by two brothers became the world's first aeroplane. It marked the beginning of modern aviation. We're talking about the Wright brothers and their priceless invention, the Wright Flyer. Back then, people thought mankind had peaked. Surely a bigger scientific achievement was impossible. More than half a century later, we know that wasn't the case. Today, we not only fly over the Earth, but also Mars. Earlier today, NASA's mini helicopter took off from her rover and successfully landed on the Martian surface. It was all remotely controlled from Earth. Think about the gravity of this event, a controlled flight on an alien planet. Take a look.
This is downlink. Data products appear to be in. We will begin processing shortly. This is flight control, confirming that we have EVRs from Ingenuity. Ingenuity is reporting having performed spin-up, takeoff, climb, hover, descent, landing, touchdown, and spin down. And altimeter data confirms that Ingenuity has performed its first flight, the first flight of a powered aircraft to another planet.
When you break it down, the feat appears simple enough. The NASA helicopter is called Ingenuity. It weighs around 1.8 kilograms. It is entirely solar powered. The flight plan was to ascend 10 feet, hold that position for half a minute and return to the surface. Today was NASA's lucky day because everything went to plan. This flight was not about showboating. It has unlocked a new era of planetary exploration. You see, the Mars has a pretty rough surface. It is sometimes called a robot killer. But a flight eliminates the risk of driving through rough terrain, which is why NASA has big plans for Ingenuity. It wants to use mini helicopters to explore the solar system. Flying on Earth is hard enough, we know, but flying on an alien planet, it's a whole different ballgame. The gravity on Mars is a third of Earth's. Its atmospheric density is 1% of what we have here. So the technology had to be far more advanced. Ingenuity had to clock 2,500 revolutions per minute. That's 5 times greater than what helicopters need on Earth. And to control these operations from 173 million miles away is no mean task. It's a wonderful milestone. But just like in 1903, we must guard against sweeping judgments, because when it comes to space exploration, even the sky is not the limit. India's Aryabhat satellite captures the spirit. Today we see ISRO scientists working in state-of-the-art labs. But that wasn't always the case. India's first satellite, Aryabhat, was made in a metal shed. Here's how the story goes. In 1968, Vikram Sarabhai was heading the Indian space program. He asked one of his students to design and build a satellite from scratch. 1 year later, a team was assembled. A team of 20 young engineers armed with nothing but their ingenuity. But who would launch this satellite? Well, the Soviets agreed as long as it was entirely designed by Indians. And so the build began. There was no lab. Instead, 4 makeshift sheds outside Bengaluru. Aryabhat was nothing short of a miracle, we say. It was designed with a budget of 3 crore rupees. And remember, there was no Western technology, because back then India was under sanctions. This group used their talent and innovation to build a satellite in 5 years. The next step was naming it. So they presented 3 options to Prime Minister Indira Gandhi. Jawahar was option number 1, the second was Maitri, and the third was Aryabhat. And we know which way the Prime Minister went. So it was called Aryabhat. On the 16th of April 1975, Aryabhat lifted off from a cosmodrome near Volgograd in Russia. 12 minutes later, it was in orbit, and since then, India has not looked back. It has emerged as a world leader in space exploration. But ISRO still retains the spirit embodied by those humble sheds in Bengaluru. Indian missions are still rooted in cost efficiency and innovation. Today marks 46 years of that iconic launch, a launch that made India believe in tall possibilities. And that's the idea behind space exploration. Beyond the science, it is about the marvel of human capabilities. And considering the times that we live in, all of us need that bit of marvel in our lives. I think that's a good note to wrap on. We're leaving you, as always, with Gravitas Images. Thanks for watching.